Good afternoon. My name is Marco, and I thought I would share my thoughts of what I don't like about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I don't know if anybody can see it, but I got plenty of books from D&D. Then we have this Cyberpunk Red. We even have a D&D poster. Then I have some Starfinder and Pathfinder and Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder 1st edition and 2nd edition. Doesn't really matter. I have been a dungeon master since 2004. So I would say that I have some experience on my shoulders in regards of D&D. The reason why I don't like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is not because of any kind of mechanics that the system has implemented that I've deemed to be silly. It may be the short rest, but it doesn't matter. I find that the game itself is very simplistic, and it is a perfect catalyst of using new people to get into TTRPGs. I find that it has taken some of the best of the previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons and sort of like taken a new twist on them as well. I don't really like the new feat system that they have implemented. The feats are absolutely useless in D&D 5th edition. But as a dungeon master, it really doesn't affect me. What affects me, though, is lore. Now, I want to iterate real quick that what I'm talking about right now is in the sense of if I want to run an adventure within Faerun during the Forgotten Realms setting, there is a very limited amount of information I have for the 5th edition. You could say that I have the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, which is a very shitty book that doesn't really offer up anything, just small tidbits and sections. I started noticing, I was blind to the issue at first, because I was actually genuinely enjoying myself. One of the many arguments one could make is that, why don't you just write your own campaign setting? Or why don't you just maybe use previous editions material for lore in order for you to run an adventure in Faerun? And that is perfectly fair. But if I play 5th edition, I should have material that is, relevant to the state of the world in Faerun of 5th edition. But, needless to say, if I wanted to summarize my experience, it's perfect. Me and my group were playing an adventure known as Storm King's Thunder, which is I don't know what I feel about that adventure per se, but it gave me a lot of lore about giants, the ordning and so on. It was very impressive. I am a sucker for lore, so I absolutely love that. The main issue that I found with Storm King's Thunder, though, is that there is going to be spoilers ahead. I just want to point out, so if you are a player and you're playing Storm King's Thunder, please stop watching. None of the complaints I have to give does not really affect players that much. But yes, at the point when Bryn Shander was attacked by all of the frost giants, they call out for the name Artus Cimber. It was actually the Frost Giant Commander Drufi who called out for Artus Cimber. They wanted the Ring of Winter. The characters, or heroes, can later on pick up a side quest if they successfully defend Bryn Shander from the Frost Giant siege, and they can pick up a quest to find out more about Artus Cimber. And it turns out that he has been last spotted in the city of Waterdeep. Okay, cool. So there's this whole side quest of the characters going, all the way from Bryn Shander, which is way up north, down to Waterdeep. So they do a travel montage. They finally get to Waterdeep. And suddenly, you get this information in the book about Waterdeep. There is no real information about Waterdeep. You can't find really anything in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. So, what I did was that I resorted to buying Waterdeep, the City of Splendor's 3.5 edition PDF from DriveThruRPG, so I could, have something to work with Waterdeep, which is a well-established city. It was a shame that I couldn't have it for, 5th edition. And that sort of irked me. This was a few years ago, I want to point out. Then Wizards of the Coast goes out and releases Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is basically a setting book for Waterdeep with a campaign. Okay? Fine. Fair enough. I can live with that. You have Curse of Strahd. Do you want to have a setting in Ravenloft? You need to buy the campaign Curse of Strahd. Okay, sure. Because there was really no lore. Like, the only lore you had was the thing that was in Curse of Strahd. Then they went on and re-released Curse of Strahd and added the Tarot cards, something that was not included in the original one. You would have to print them, which is fine. A lot of people got a little bit upset about that. For me, it didn't really matter. I can just print these tarot cards or just use regular cards like the book recommends you do. Then they go ahead and announce that they're going to release a Ravenloft setting book. Okay, so nowadays you no longer will have to get Curse of Strahd in order for you to have a Ravenloft setting. Fair enough. Fine, sure. I'm not going to buy it though. There is also the issue of the lack of rules and information that a dungeon master gets to use. I don't want to draw any direct comparisons to things because it feels very unfair. D&D 5th edition has been out way longer than, let us say, just for example, Pathfinder 2nd edition. The player's handbook for D&D, let me just double check with Amazon here. The player's handbook costs about $30, $30.50 on Amazon, whereas the core rulebook for Pathfinder 2nd edition costs $36.11. The difference of information that you can find in these books are staggering. Let me show you. So in my hand, I have the player's handbook for the 5th edition. This is basically where you can get most of your core rules for how the game works. And it also has, it is a player's handbook. It is essential for you to, play the game to at least own one of these. Fair enough. It has some good material in it. And as you can see, I have some stuff here as well. But it has some good material in it, and it holds some rules that are important for the game in order for you to understand it. If you want some extended set of rules, then you would have to get the Dungeon Master's Guide. Fair enough. So that one is $30. For $6 more, you would get the Pathfinder 2nd edition core rulebook, which is this. Now, you might say, oh, that's bloated. No, it is not really bloated. And the amount of information in difference here is staggering. That was also one thing that really irked me. Hey, kitty. It was also one thing that really irked me. If I want to find out about how ship combat works, I can just pick this up. If I want an expanded description of ship combat, I guess I could just use the Dungeon Master's Guide for Pathfinder 2nd edition. If I want to know how ship combat actually works in D&D 5th edition, I would have to get the Ghost of Saltmarsh adventure. Why? Why is that not included? Then there is also the fact, how they're driving home. This is something that is not just for Dungeons and Dragons, but this I absolutely abhor. Okay, so I get it that you want people to actually purchase your stuff in order, to make a revenue, get some money. So let's say that we are doing, Tomb of Annihilation, one of my favorite campaigns that introduces hex travel, because you cannot get hex travel information in the player's handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide. You get it in an adventure book. But it is relevant to the adventure, so that's fine. In Tomb of Annihilation, it will say, you face 1d4 of these creatures on page blah, blah, blah in Tomb of Annihilation. And then you have 1d6 of these creatures that you can find on page 188 in the monster manual. Why not print it on the same page? Or why not have that information on the page where the encounter is? So what happens is that you find yourself dragging along a quintillion amount of books with you just to run a goddamn encounter in D&D 5th edition. It becomes bloated. But they have a solution, you see. You don't need that. You can just subscribe to D&D Beyond. And in order for you to subscribe to D&D Beyond, you will have to repurchase all those books. Oh, but D&D Beyond is great because you can share all of this information with your players. So basically, you wouldn't have to bring the physical books anymore, and you could share this information with all the players in your party. They can create characters on D&D Beyond if they so wish and micromanage their characters, and they can read up all the source items in D&D Beyond. But you will also have to pay a subscription in order for you to do that. Really. That is my main gripe with D&D 5th edition. It results with you having to spend too much money on just being able to run it. Oh, you want to do an adventure that has a setting in Ravenloft that is going to have ship combat in it, that is also going to have maybe exploration accounted to it, because you want to do a exploration campaign. Okay, then you will need Curse of Strahd, or the new Ravenloft setting book. You will need Tomb of Annihilation for the exploration rules. You will need Ghosts of Saltmarsh to get the proper statistics for ships. Then you might wonder and ask yourself, what is the Dungeon Master's Guide for? Well, the Dungeon Master's Guide is actually great. I like it. It has some great tips on how to create dungeon, to create magical items, to create cursed items. It is basically almost the same thing. I also, to throw some shade at Pathfinder, just because to show that I am not completely biased in this situation, they don't introduce exploration rules in this one. They do it in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You know, where that should actually belong and not in an adventure. But yeah, sure. So you would need the players also. If the players want to read up on the rules, they would need to look through the Ghosts of Saltmarsh and that adventure. It's not in the player's handbook. So you would sit there. So let me just... In order for me to get information about Waterdeep, I would have... let's say I want to rerun Storm King's Thunder. And let us say that the players go to Waterdeep. Okay. And they go to Waterdeep by boat. And I might want ship combat. And there might be some exploration rules into that as well. Because exploration is way simpler to take care of when it comes to big travels. Because you're traveling really big in Storm King's Thunder, because it is an open world adventure with almost no material whatsoever for the Dungeon Master to work with in regards of how Faerun is. But you would need the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, first off. So you need the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide because you need some information about the Sword Coast. You would need Ghosts of Saltmarsh because ship encounters. You would need Tomb of Annihilation because of exploration rules. You will need Storm King's Thunder because you're doing Storm King's Thunder. You will need the Monster Manual because obviously you need the Monster Manual. You will need Waterdeep Dragon Heist because obviously you need to know about Waterdeep. That's 6 books. All of that information should be... I'm not saying that I expected like 15 chapters or 3 chapters or even 1 chapter about Waterdeep, but what I expected was more than this. And what I expected is that the rule books should actually have the rules in them. I feel like Wizards of the Coast have become very big, and I am very happy that people are enjoying Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing in general. Role-playing is a fantastic thing, and I am so happy to see it grow over the years. A lot of because of the success of Critical Role, don't get me wrong, but what Wizards of the Coast are doing is not very different from what they did in 4th edition. In 4th edition, they released a fuck ton of books, first off. And then there was also the emphasis on combat. So, you want to be able to run combat, you need to buy these pogs or these tokens or whatnot. So the whole system was almost based around you just purchasing miniatures and these pogs and tokens and whatnot to have the proper combat and so on. It was just so combat heavy. D&D 5th edition is not really that combat heavy, I would say. Depending on how you run it, mind you. But 4th edition was another different kind of monster. And what Wizards of the Coast do now is that, you want to purchase miniatures. Cool. Get this box that is going to be limited. and you will get you don't know what NPC you might get. You might not be able to get what you look for, but like everybody says, it is a hobby of collecting these miniatures. Okay, cool. Why don't they offer pawn boxes like Pathfinder 2nd Edition does? I'll show you. So what Pathfinder 2nd Edition did, and I believe 1st Edition as well, is that they offer a pawn box. This pawn box has wallpaper cutouts. Wallpaper cutouts, is that even the right word? I don't know. I'm Swedish. I'm sorry. Wallpaper cutouts of monsters that are inside the bestiary or monster manual. I don't need to purchase some weird ass shit to represent the monsters on this that they are encountering anymore. They can see, okay, shit, he's pulling out 5 zombie wallpaper cutouts. We're facing 5 zombies. You can just use regular coins. You don't have to do it, but the issue itself is the business practice that Wizards of the Coast is doing for 5th edition is toxic and should be called out for. I love Dungeons and Dragons, but the way that they are pushing their weird goddamn books, these strange expansions we have seen as of late, the whole idea of we're going to keep rules away from you, and in order for you to get these rules, you will need to purchase this adventure, this pre-written adventure. You might not even be interested in this pre-written adventure, but in order for you, the dungeon master, to get the rules, in order for you to run a campaign that you want to run for your players, you will need to purchase a fuck ton of books. That is my main gripe with D&D 5th edition. That and that rogues are fucking overpowered. It's just a rant. I'm a nobody. Just wanted to say it out loud. Thanks for listening. Stay safe.